In this video, we will show you how to program the mixing valve on the iGrow1400 controller. The mixing valve equipment type requires 2 consecutive channels, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. The first channel, odd numbered, must be wired to open the valve, and the other, the even numbered, to close it. To program the mix valve, from the home screen you would hit Enter Menu, and then you would go to Program Equipment, and then you would hit Enter Menu to highlight the number in the corner, and then hit Next to highlight the none, plus to expand the none, and then plus until you get to the mix valve equipment type device. Hit back. Hit Next until you get to temp 1. Now the first entry in programming is our water temp sensor, which tells the iGrow1400 which temp probe is being used to measure the hot water supply of the greenhouse. And since you can have up to 5 temp probes connected, be sure you set this to the correct one. Use plus and minus to navigate through your selections, and we're going to go ahead and use temp 1. Hitting plus and minus allows you to choose the different ones. Hit Next. Now the min is the minimum water temperature of the supply pipe. If the supply water temperature ever goes below this value, the mix valve will adjust and increase the supply water temperature. Change values of this field by simply hitting plus and minus, and for demonstration purposes we will set this at 70 degrees. Okay, next. Now, the max is the maximum temperature that the supply water should ever become. If the supply water temperature ever approaches this value, the mix valve will adjust and decrease the supply water temperature. This is especially important when PVC pipes are being used. Now, to change this value, simply hit plus or minus, and we'll set this value at 90 degrees. And hit Next. And here we have open time, which is the time it takes for the mix valve to go from fully open to fully closed. Measure this time with a stopwatch, and then add a few seconds, and then enter it in the open time field. And we have timed our valve, and it was timed at 1 minute and 10 seconds. Hit Next to get to the next screen. Now the heat turn on delay is the estimated time it takes for the heating system to affect the greenhouse temperature. This is determined by taking a temperature reading with all the heating and cooling equipment off and the mix valve closed, then manually switching the mix valve open. You want to measure the time it takes for the ambient temperature within the greenhouse to rise 2 degrees. And then you would take that time value and you would enter it right here. For now, we're going to leave it at 0. Hit Next. Now, if you want the iGrow1400 to control a pump associated with the mix valve system, this is where you would select which pump to control. You must use and program one output channel to control the pump. And we have one pump already programmed on output number 3, and we have named that pump number 1. The pump we will use for this mix valve system. Hit Next. Now here we have Shock Protect. Now setting Shock Protect to yes forces the mix valve to open slowly, preventing an inrush of cold water into your boiler system. Shock Protect will work 2 different ways depending on whether or not you have a return temp sensor assigned below. Without a return temp sensor, the iGrow1400 will still protect the boiler by adjusting how quickly the valve opens based on how long it's been since the valve was open last. The longer the time, the slower it will open. But for training purposes, we will use a return temp sensor, and we'll program our return temp sensor as temp 3. Hit Next here. And we'll go ahead and change this value to 105 degrees. Hit Next. We'll leave the limit to 5% open. Now note, these are the settings for the return water supply to the mix valve. In this example, if the return water temperature is below 105, then the mix valve will only open 5% until the return temperature reaches the low temperature set point of the supply water temperature. Now hit next. Now, these are two additional programming screens for PID control, and these screens have to be activated in advanced settings. Note, the iGrow1400 default settings for PID should be suitable for most installations and therefore should not be modified without a good understanding of PID controls. If you feel a change is necessary and are not sure how to proceed, contact your local distributor or link forward directly for assistance. And now that we have programmed this mix valve, let's go ahead and put this mix valve to the test. With our test, our water temperature sensor is temp 1, our min is 70, and our max is 90 degrees. Our return temp sensor is temp 3, and our shock protect is 105 degrees with a 5% open limit. And our output number 3, our pump 1 supply, is with a 10% threshold. So let's begin by making temp 1 70 degrees and temp 2 90 degrees, which they already at 70 and 90. Now, as you can see, by changing temp 1 to 60 degrees, the mix valve is closing beyond 5%, which is forcing the pump to be active. But if I was to quickly decrease temp 3 to go from 120 to a threshold within shock protect, you can see immediately the mix valve changes to 5% and begins to close, and the pump becomes immediately inactive. And that's our video in programming mixing valves with the iGrow 1400